no one path has a monopoly on joy. No one path has a monopoly on fulfillment or meaning or purpose or love. Those things are available to you no matter what you choose in your life. And let's not disillusion ourselves or scare ourselves into thinking that if we choose one path or another, it means that suddenly we won't experience anything good. That's totally false. No matter what you choose, wonderful experiences and emotions are available to you. I promise you. I'm Keltie Maguire, and you're listening to the Kids Are Childfree Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Kids Are Childfree Podcast. Today I have a solo episode planned for you. I thought perhaps I would come on here a bit more frequently and share on some of the topics that I have coming up in coaching calls, share some of the questions that I'm getting over on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you after you listen to this episode. Would you like to hear more solo episodes? Or do you prefer that I stick to guest conversations? Now, of course, we have many more guest conversations lined up for the balance of this season. But in the meantime, today, you are stuck with me, and we're going to be talking all about FOMO, or the fear of missing out, and specifically how it relates to the kids or child-free decision. Now, how I see this coming up with a lot of my clients is they are afraid of the things they're going to be missing out on when they choose one path or over another. And so most typically when people are thinking about choosing having kids, they worry about missing out on all the things that they love about their child-free life today. The independence, the freedom, the sleeping in, the being able to travel on a whim, whatever those things are that make your child-free life really special and unique to you. These are the things that you worry about missing out on should you choose to have kids. And on the flip side of the coin, for those of you who are considering staying child-free, you worry that you are going to miss out on this fundamental human experience, as we're told it is, of having a child or children. And of course, having kids, I don't have any, but so I'm told, and as I imagine, it is something unlike anything else. And this is part of what makes this decision really hard, is we don't really know. We can guess what it might be like to have kids, but without having something similar to experience, we are going into the unknown. It is part of what makes this experience of choosing really scary, because there's not really a way to try on having kids for size. But we do know from what we hear from parents is that having kids is something unlike anything else in its magnitude, in its specialness, in the love you can experience for your child. And so hearing that it's sort of the ultimate, or if you will, or the pinnacle of life's experiences. And by the way, I realize not all parents say this, but this is sort of like that broader narrative that we are fed or told. We worry that if we don't have kids, we're going to be missing out on this pinnacle of life's experiences. Now, with FOMO, a lot of times we worry about regret, right? Like, what if I regret my decision? I feel good about it today, but in the future, I realize I've effectively missed out. We also think about FOMO often when we already feel or we anticipate feeling like an outsider. So what I do hear from many women on the fence is that they feel like they're an outsider relative to those people they've known who've already had children. And sometimes people worry about feeling like an outsider if very few or no people in their circle have had or plan to have children. So again, it can work both ways. And I want to be clear in addressing this, that FOMO can certainly show up for us regardless of which side of the decision we are leaning or ultimately end up going. So I want to share some of the shifts that I personally made and how I've approached this topic with my clients when we're thinking about and worrying about FOMO. And like all of the work that I do and all of the suggestions that I give to my clients, there's no one size fits all approach. I'm not here to tell you that if you are worried about or thinking about the fear of missing out, that all you need to do is think this or do this or say that, and it's going to be remedied. Instead, I want to share a few different perspectives with you that, again, have been personally helpful for me and that I use in my coaching calls with my clients to help them shift the way they're viewing this fear of missing out. All right, so let's get into it. The first big thing that has been so instrumental for me in managing this fear that I am missing out on an incredible experience, in my case, of having children, right? I've chosen the child-free path. How have I navigated this sense that I may be missing out in or by not having kids? It really starts with rooting myself in what is versus what is not. So if I'm constantly looking at all the things I don't have, all the things I won't feel, all the things I'm never going to experience, that is naturally going to lead to dissatisfaction. And so for me, rather than looking at people I know who have kids and looking at this beautiful experience of childbirth or having an infant or the bond I see my friends having with their, growing children as they enter into the teen years and discover the person that they have birthed and now are raising, rather than focusing on that, and of course, these can be beautiful things to observe. But if I was constantly thinking, wow, look what they have, look what they get, look how amazing it is, I don't get that, that's naturally going to lead to discontent. So for me, I root myself in what is in my own life. What are the connections I have? What are the experiences that I'm getting to have that I love? And this isn't about saying what I have is better than that what they have, those parents over there. But this is about saying like what is and how can I find joy in what is. It's really about being present in my own life. And if there are things that are bringing me dissatisfaction in which I feel, unhappy or like I'm not really fulfilled, that's an opportunity for me to look at what can I change. But again, not doing that in a sense of comparison, but really looking at, okay, as a person without kids, if I'm feeling dissatisfied, what can I do to make some changes in my life to bring myself more contentment or fulfillment? All right. So, in terms of how I've managed FOMO with regards to relationships that I have, whether that's family, friends, colleagues, what have you, whether in the past or present or future, when I think about me missing out or being an outsider relative to other people having the experience of parenthood, there's a few different ways in which I've thought about this. And again, you can apply this not just if you are leaning or perhaps choosing child free, but also if you are leaning towards or choosing parenthood, because again, you can still feel like an outsider if, let's say, you're the first in your friends to have a child, or perhaps you're part of a circle of people who haven't chosen to have kids. I see big differences amongst my clients depending on the industry they work in, whether they're in like a more urban environment, for example, or somewhere more rural. That can really have a bearing on what sort of path people are choosing with regards to kids or child free. So for me, first of all, I try and really focus on the shared values and experiences that I have with the people in my life. So rather than looking at, for example, I'll say one of my best friends who is a mom, I could say, she's a mom, she's focused on her kid, she's having these experiences I'm not having, she has friends who are moms. I don't get it. I'm over here feeling, left out. Instead, I'm saying, okay, what do we have in common with each other? What are things that we both enjoy? We both enjoy reading books. We both enjoy travel. And that doesn't mean we can't talk about my child-free path or her choice to have children. But it does mean that it doesn't have to be like the sole focus of our relationship. And what I hear from so many mom friends is, especially when their kids are young, is that they're really grateful to have connections with people who have something else to bring to their life and to share. And I can also think in the case of a couple of my friends, they've also said it's important for them to show their children that there are other paths that a person can choose. Now, if you are really struggling and you're feeling like, I'm a child-free person or I'm on the fence and I'm trying to connect with somebody and I feel like we don't have shared values anymore. We don't have, experiences that we can share because they're so immersed in being a parent. That, of course, is something that happens. In some cases, that can be, I don't want to say a phase. That sounds a little bit kind of demeaning, but it can just be a period of time in a relationship that can change. But I also think it's really important that we recognize sometimes there will be loss that's associated with this decision where it concerns our relationships, our friendships, perhaps family members, etc. And I don't want to dismiss that or essentially minimize it because that can be something really tough to navigate. So I do want to say, if that's your experience, I see you. I'm sorry if you're experiencing this and this sort of fear of missing out or being an outsider based on someone in your life having made different decisions from you. But again, trying to look at cultivating relationships with, whether it's new friendships or current friendships with people where you have shared values, things that you enjoy doing together with or without your children, that can be something to focus in on rather than looking at all the ways in which you're different. And I might just add, those differences can be really beautiful as well. And I really appreciate having different perspectives in my life and having friends who've chosen very different life paths, whether it's having or not having kids, whether it's living somewhere else, whether it's having chosen a different profession from me, having different kinds of relationships. Those things all add a lot of richness to my own life. I think something we also want to bear in mind is that our experiences are always going to be unique to us. And so even if there's someone else who's chosen the same path as us, let's say someone else who's chosen to have kids, it doesn't mean that our experience of being a parent, our relationship with our child or children, the way we feel about them, our way of raising them with our partner, if we're partnered, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the same. So sometimes this feeling that we're missing out or feeling like an outsider, feeling different than others, even if we make the quote unquote same decision as someone, it may not actually play out to feel the same, and we may still feel disconnected. So I think it's just important we recognize that, because it's easy to sort of be under this illusion that if only we had or did make the same choice as our friend or friends, that everything would be hunky-dory, one expression, and that we would never feel like an outsider. Again, feeling outside, feeling alone, that's just a human experience that we all sometimes will feel. I just want to give an example as well, because I gave that example of focusing on shared experiences and values if you choose not to have kids and your friends have chosen to have kids. Likewise, if you're the person who is leaning towards or decides to have children and you feel like you can't relate to your child-free friends, I really want to encourage open conversation and looking at, although this person may not understand, probably won't understand this key fundamental sort of experience that you're having, at least fundamental to your life, of course. I don't want to imply that we all have to have children. Of course, that's not hasn't been my choice. But rather than focusing in on those differences, again, looking for where are there opportunities in that friendship to help me sort of maintain or uphold my identity as a woman who is more than a mom, who has interests that go beyond being a parent. Also having honest conversations with friends in terms of, how they can support you through this journey of motherhood, because I think there's sometimes alienation that can happen on both sides, where because there is a lack of understanding of what it is to have a child, what it is to be the one who hasn't had a child and how that can be an alienating experience. I think sometimes we find ourselves not talking about how we can navigate friendships. And as an aside, before I go down the friendship rabbit hole too much, because of course this is a dedicated conversation that we can have here and perhaps we'll have on a future episode, I do have a free download that you can get over at kidsorchildfree.com. And I'll link to it in today's show notes. But it's called Between Friends. It's a recording of a class that I did, or sort of not even really a class. It was a conversation I had with a good friend of mine, Lauren Grant, who is a stepmom. She's a filmmaker. And we talked about how we've navigated our friendship and given perspectives from both sides, as a child-free woman and in her case as a mom. And so that may offer some insights that can be helpful for you on this friendship front. All right. If you are finding today's episode all about FOMO helpful, you are going to want to check out my 3-month Kids Are Child-Free group coaching program, because we are kicking off the next round of this program and it's our last session for 2024. That's happening starting mid-October. And with this program, you're going to find yourself in a virtual room with like-minded women who are also on the fence about this decision. I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process to help you get clear on the decision that's right for you. And we're not only going to be talking about FOMO, but we're going to be exploring the regrets that you might be worried about having. We're going to talk about the beliefs that are keeping you stuck. We're going to help you figure out what's really important to you. What do you want, need, and desire in your life, broadly speaking, so that you can create a life that feels good. You can make a decision that feels aligned. And frankly, you can get on with your life so you're no longer stuck and on the fence, and you can move forward with a decision that's right for you. I will share all the details in the show notes of today's episode. You can also find the info on my group program over at kidsorchildfree.com. I just want to say one last thing where it concerns FOMO and relationships, and that is a reminder that when we've ultimately chosen our choice, or even if we're on the fence right now and we remain there for the foreseeable future, that We can cultivate new relationships, and we should be. And this doesn't mean letting go of old relationships, although sometimes that also happens, but really thinking about who are people who are in that same sort of boat as me. And as an example, I know I found a lot of solace in recognizing there were one or two other friends who were also navigating this kids or child-free decision. I felt very alone when I was grappling with whether or not to have kids. And yet, once I started opening up about that sort of ambivalence I felt and uncertainty, I realized that it wasn't just me and that I had other girlfriends who are struggling with this decision. So, sort of doubling down on those relationships, or now looking at friends of mine who've chosen not to have kids, putting a priority on really spending time with those people, doing travel together, doing and having those experiences that perhaps aren't available right now to my friends who have young children. That's been really important to me. And the other thing to encourage you to do is to cultivate new relationships. And this is going to be, again, really important regardless of what path you choose, is to know that the people you're connected with and friends with today, that doesn't need to be the extent of your circle. I think we have this idea when we think about what our future lives, either with or without kids, are going to be like, to imagine it with the same sort of cast of characters, if you will, as the people who are in our life today. But I want you to know that you're going to meet new people. If you choose to have kids, you are going to become connected with other women, other parents who also have children and who are at that same stage and who are going through the same things as you. And likewise, if you choose to stay child-free, there are incredible communities of child-free people out there that you can cultivate relationships with. So just know that and I'll share a quote I love, and I'm sorry that I can't attribute it, although perhaps I should look it up and pop it in the show notes with proper attribution. But it's something to the effect of, isn't it beautiful to know there are people you will love who you haven't even met yet? And this is something that gives me a lot of solace, is to remember that although I have a wonderful extended network of loved ones, friends, family, different connections, that there are people I haven't even met who I'm going to become close with, who I'm going to have adventures with, who I'm going to travel with, who are going to see eye to eye with me. I really believe that. And I want you to believe that to be true for yourself as well. All right, some further thoughts on fear of missing out. Something that may bring you surprising comfort is to just reaffirm the fact that, yep, you are missing out. You are going to miss out on whatever you don't choose. And to be able to find peace with that. I'm not going to imply it's going to come right away and that you saying to yourself, I am missing out, and listening to this episode is suddenly magically going to make you feel better. But just acknowledging that, yeah, I am missing out. And in my case, saying I am missing out on this really beautiful human experience of having a child or children somehow makes me feel okay with it. It's yeah, I'm missing it. Not dwelling on it, not ruminating on it, not crying myself to sleep every night thinking about what I'm missing out on, but just saying, yeah, I'm missing it. And that's okay, because I'm also experiencing other things. Again, going back to my first point that I made about really rooting myself in what is versus what is not. There is so much peace to be found, not just with regards to this decision, but frankly, in every area of your life, when you acknowledge and come to terms with the fact that you cannot do it all. You can't do it all. You cannot be in all the relationships and live all the places and have all of the different professions. We know this intellectually, right? We can't do it all. And the thing is, you never could do it all. It's not just with this decision. This has shown up in your life again and again and again. We have to choose a path. Doors eventually have to be closed. And if you stay in limbo, if you stay in this middle zone of oh, I'm on the fence, I don't know what I want. And by the way, this is not me pushing you to make a decision. I understand that this is a process that takes time. I've been there. I've been stuck for a long time. But if you indefinitely stay in this middle zone, you are missing all of the joy that comes from affirmatively choosing a path. The fact is we are all missing out on something in life. There is no way that we can be, do, have, experience it all as much as we may try. So for me, it's just saying I am missing out, and having kids is probably something super cool. It's no doubt very hard. I frankly don't think it's for me, at least not in this lifetime, based on the decisions I've made and my temperament and where I find myself today, the life that I'm living. But yeah, I'm sure it's amazing. And that's okay. It's okay for me to not experience that. I also think embracing this idea that different choices are just that. They're just different choices. It's not necessarily better or worse. I mean, for example, I was in sales for a long time, but I could have just as easily have been in human resources. Would a career in human resources have been better than a career in sales? Maybe. I mean, you can perhaps right now you're thinking about the merits of one versus the other. You're thinking, okay, well, in sales, you can have uncapped earning potential if you're in the right role. But oh, in HR, you're not going to have the pressure of having to hit those sales targets or whatever it may be. You get to deal with people, in both positions, but in HR, you're going to get to know your team members better. And in sales, I mean, I'm just kind of talking off the cuff here. But the fact is like, at the end of the day, they're just different jobs. Just like my business today is not necessarily better or worse than other businesses that I've had. It's just different. That said, for me right now today, this path that I've chosen, living in Germany, running my kids or child-free business, helping women get clarity in various areas of their life, living child-free, that's what feels right for me today. But it's not necessarily better than any other choice. It's just different. The way I really think about it and how I bring myself some sort of solace around this idea that I'm missing out is if the experience that I am having or what I have in my life feels good to me, does it actually matter if there's something quote unquote better, right? Like we think about let's use this example. You'll never know great love until you have a child. The way I think about it is I know and experience love and it feels damn good. I mean, I think about the love I have with my husband and how not every day, but how often I feel like deeply in love with him. I feel like our love has grown richer and just, I don't know how to explain it, but like fills me up in a way that it didn't even in those early butterflies, sort of, young new love way. I think about the way I feel about my dog or the love I have for my little nephew. I think about love I have for my friendships and I think, God, it feels good to love. This is love. Now, what if I were to find out that actually that's not love? What if I found out and there was some way of measuring that the love my friend has for her husband is deeper and greater than the love I have for my husband? I mean, it's kind of bizarre just to think about it. Like, how, first of all, would we know that? And even if that could be captured or measured, we could quantify love we have for a romantic partner. I don't really care that much if she loves her husband or he loves her more than I love my husband or he loves me, because what I have feels good. And this goes back to that first point I made again about rooting myself in what is. What is that I have great love. I'm not focused on the greater love that I don't have. It's kind of silly that we think about things this way, right? Of there being this greater sort of this epitome of purpose, meaning, connection, love that we associate with having a child. And again, even if it does exist, even if it is better and I am missing out, which to the point I previously made, I am missing out. I'm missing out on having a kid. I'm not going to do that. It's very simple. Even if all of that's true, I'm okay with it because I'm happy with what is and what I have feels good to me. All right, to wrap up today's conversation, I thought I would share a few questions that you might want to journal on to help you delve deeper into some of what I've just discussed with you here. So the first one is thinking about what do you stand to gain by choosing this path? And you can ask yourself this question for both, what do I stand to gain if I stay child-free? What do I stand to gain if I choose to have kids? I personally, and I think it can be helpful at a certain point, especially if you're heavily leaning one direction or the other, to focus in on that, to focus in on what do you stand to gain if, and in my case it was, what do I stand to gain if I stay child-free? The reason why this question is helpful to explore is it roots you in, again, what is or what can be versus all the things that you're missing out on. I'm really not big about focusing in on loss because there are always going to be losses in life. And an illustration from another area of my life that we can use to sort of, give voice to this question, what do I stand to gain by choosing this path, is when I was thinking about, and when Chris and I were both thinking about moving to Germany, we could have gone, kind of crazy making lists, pros and cons, what's better about here, what's better about that. What am I going to, what am I missing out on if I'm going to leave Vancouver? I'm going to miss out on better craft beer. I'm going to miss on being close to my family. I'm going to miss out on having the ocean, the mountains right there. Instead, knowing that we were really leaning towards Germany, but we still weren't quite sure, I thought, what do I stand to gain by moving to Germany? And I looked at the chance to travel through Europe and understand my husband's country and culture better, to be able to deepen relationships with our friends in Europe, to be able to learn the language more, whatever the different things were. I focused in on that and really looked at how did that make me feel? Did that excite me? Another question we can ask ourselves where it concerns FOMO and our exploration of this topic is, what am I unwilling to give up or lose? So not focusing in on the losses. This isn't about saying what am I going to lose, but just in your life in general, what are you unwilling to give up on or lose? And that may also help, or I should say, that might hold some clues about which path is right for you. Not definitively speaking, but it might just give you an idea amongst all the other work that I know you're doing to uncover this decision. And so for me, I was unwilling to give up my autonomy and independence and freedom. I'm sure that I would have gained something really wonderful if I had chose to have kids. But for me, it was no, I really want this autonomous, independent life that I have built, living on the other side of the world, having a great relationship with my partner, but also having a lot of independence within that relationship, being able to focus on myself, my own self-growth, my business, serving my clients, being, support to my loved ones, but not necessarily bringing in additional responsibilities. So again, the question is, what am I unwilling to give up or lose? Okay, next question is, if you are afraid of missing out on something, you're having this FOMO, which imaginably you've got some FOMO going on if you're listening to this episode. I want you to ask yourself, what am I really afraid of missing out on? In other words, if you were to sort of peel back the layers or look underneath of this fear of, for example, I'm worried I'm going to be missing out on, perhaps it shows up as I'm worried I'm going to be an outsider with my friends, right? I'm going to be on the outs, not have that connection. What are you really afraid of? What's underneath of that? And in this case, perhaps it's feeling seen and understood by the people you love. Maybe it's about being a part of things. You're really afraid of losing connection. Okay, so just asking yourself, and so what? And what's underneath that? What's underneath that can help you get to the core of what that fear is. The next part of this question is asking yourself, how can I cultivate this in my life no matter what I choose? So whether I choose to have kids or stay child-free, if feeling seen and held by the people I love is important to me, if feeling great connection with the people that I'm friends with is important to me, how can I make sure to cultivate this in my life? And it might be about making commitments to uphold those relationships, to invest more time in them than you've been doing. Maybe it's going to be about cultivating new friendships. There's no right or wrong answer here. But again, this is thinking about a core need of yours and how you can make it a priority, even if you choose, or I should say, regardless of what you choose. One last thing, and this is partly a question and partly a practice, is to work on cultivating more peace with what is and peace with a path not chosen. And I don't have a formulaic fixed way of doing this. But again, reminding yourself that what is this present moment that you have, the way your life is today, is what's within your control. Not thinking about the future, what might happen, how you might feel, but really looking at starting with where you are. And a question you can explore is, how can I squeeze the most out of this path in life that I'm on? I think about my child-free path as like a lemon. I want to squeeze the most juice out of that lemon. Maybe it's not a lemon where they say, make lemonade out of lemons, but the fact it could be a nice orange, for example. Whatever your fruit metaphor is that you want to run with here, how can you squeeze the most juice out of this path? I'm not going to focus on all the things that I'm missing out on, all the things I'm not having because I don't have kids. Instead, I'm saying, how can I experience as much as I can in this child-free life? How can I make sure I'm going on the trips I want to go on? How can I ensure that I'm cultivating deep relationships with others and with myself? It doesn't necessarily mean doing more, but it's about making sure that you are living your life in a way that feels fulfilling and satisfying to you. All right, a final reminder that I want to offer before we wrap up today's session is that no one decision is going to make you immune to life's challenges and struggles. In other words, no matter whether you choose to have kids or choose to stay child-free, you are not going to never experience sadness or grief or frustration or this feeling that you are missing out on something. That's just part of being human. And I think we have this idea that by choosing the quote, right path, we talked about the idea of a right path and a wrong path. We have this idea that by choosing the right path, we won't feel bad, right? We're not going to feel what we call negative emotions in our lives. But that's just not realistic because in life, again, no matter what we choose, there's going to be disappointments, there's going to be hardships, there's going to be challenges. The good news, or the upside of that, is that no one path has a monopoly on joy. No one path has a monopoly on fulfillment or meaning or purpose or love. Those things are available to you no matter what you choose in your life. And let's not disillusion ourselves or scare ourselves into thinking that if we choose one path or another, it means that suddenly we won't experience anything good. That's totally false. No matter what you choose, wonderful experiences and emotions are available to you. I promise you. I am a living testament of that. And I have so many other clients who are the same. All right. Thank you for tuning in for this solo episode all about FOMO. Now, I would love to hear from you. Send me a DM over on Instagram. Our Instagram, by the way, is linked in the show notes. Let me know, do you want more solo episodes? And if so, if the answer is yes, what episodes do you want me to, or I should say, what topics would you like me to address next? All right, that is all for me. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the Kids or Child-Free Podcast. I will ask you to kindly leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you are enjoying what you are hearing, if you're finding it helpful, if you have recommended this podcast to a friend, if it's your most listened to every week, if you give it a thumbs up, 5 out of 5 stars, all that good stuff, head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can do this both in-app. I'll include the links in the show notes for today's episode, and give us a rating or review. It will help us to get discovered by other listeners, and I will be very grateful to you. All right. Thank you so much, and wishing you a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of the Kids or Child-Free Podcast. Now, I have a few new goodies for you over on the free resources page, which you'll find at kidsorchildfree.com. I will also link to this in today's show notes. And the new resources that I've added are a podcast episode, a secret podcast episode, if you will. It's a recording that I made prior to launching the Kids or Child-Free Podcast. And it's actually a very personal share of mine related to a situation that happened with a friend of mine. And it really talks about how triggering this kids or child-free decision can be. It's vulnerable. There may or may not be a few tears shed, and it's available exclusively when you head to the free resources page and sign up for it at kidsorchildfree.com. The other resource I recently added is the replay of the event we had earlier in the spring, which was the Between Friends conversation I had with my friend Lauren Grant, who is a filmmaker. She is a mom. And we talked all about how we've maintained our friendship throughout all the ups and downs that motherhood and this decision that I've made has brought. We talk about how you personally can navigate some of the concerns and the challenges that you might be having in your friendships when one of you has kids and the other one doesn't. Again, check it out. That's at kidsorchildfree.com under the free resources tab. Thank you again for listening today, and we'll see you back here soon for another episode of the Kids or Child Free Podcast.